Okay. Yeah, I will come back at the end to wrap up, and otherwise leave any introductions to Janet, who is sharing the session today.
Thank you very much, Lena. So just to say again, welcome to everybody for attending our July meeting of the Hub Cymru Africa Gender Community of Practice session. So this is a really good opportunity to learn and share in order we can incorporate lessons and experiences into our own work. So today we're really delighted to welcome Size of Wales and the Mount Elgon Tree Growing Enterprise. So Barbara, Davies-Quy and Lorna Alum will be leading the session today, and we're really grateful to you. Thank you very much. You're going to be telling us about your work in Uganda, sharing the findings of your recent gender assessment. There'll be time to ask questions afterwards. Please do take advantage of this opportunity to raise issues, ask questions. It could be about the methodology, it could be about the findings, or maybe the recommendations. Gender mainstreaming is all important for all of us, and it imposes it. We face a number of different issues and problems, and therefore learning opportunities like this can be really invaluable. So I think without further ado, I think Barbara's going to go give her introduction to start us off. So welcome, Barbara, and then I think we're going to hear from Lorna as well. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Janet. Thank you, Lena. And really, really lovely to be here today to share the work that we're doing in Uganda with our partner METGE. Just briefly, that I work at Size of Wales. So Size of Wales aims to protect tropical forests the size of Wales. So if no one knows how big Wales is, we are 2 million hectares. So we work with local and indigenous communities to protect forests overseas, and also to grow and restore degraded forests, which is what we're doing particularly in Uganda. And in Wales, we also aim to inspire people in Wales, particularly young people, to take climate action. And also we're really looking at how we can reduce our overseas deforestation footprint. And we're really keen to take action on climate change from a gender perspective. So that's why we're really pleased that we have this project now set up in Uganda to look at the issues related between climate and gender justice, because if there is no gender justice, there will be no climate justice. So just a bit of a background as to why we are kind of concerned about the issue of women and climate change. So we know that women are most affected by the impacts of climate change because they constitute the majority of the world's poor. Women are most likely to be displaced from their homes because of changing climate. They face greater risks because of gender-based violence when disasters strike or displacement happens. They are dependent for their food and income on land and natural resources, which are being impacted by climate change, and they are often more likely to be responsible for collecting water, food, fuel, cooking, and for heating as well, and therefore more at risk when there are extreme weather conditions, and they are more likely to be excluded from decision-making roles, both at a local, national and international level. But we feel, there's strong evidence to show that you need to have women's voice in decision-making at all levels regarding climate change. So there have been studies to show that where there are more women in politics at all levels, those countries are more successful in reducing their carbon dioxide emissions. And a study showed that in 130 countries where women positions are more likely to sign international treaties on climate change resolutions than male colleagues. So where there are more women, they're more likely to sign international treaties on climate resolutions. And bringing more women's voices into our response on climate change will help us all. So I think just kind of really backing up why it's so important to do this work. So we have a project that we received funding from Hub Cymru Africa, their gender grant, and the Welsh Government, which started in in March of this year, and we're working with 2 partners in Uganda, with METGE, so that's where Lorna works, and with another partner, METGE, through the International Tree Foundation. So we're working in 2 areas of Uganda, Mbali and Masaka, sorry, that should be say Masaka district, focusing specifically on gender and climate justice issues. We want the role of women and girls to be strengthened to tackle climate change and manage natural resources in a sustainable way. And we kind of had 4 outputs. It's just a year-long kind of pilot project. But one of the key outputs was ensuring that women and girls had increased knowledge and strengthened their decision-making power in relation to climate change. But that also involves training gender champions as well, both men and women. Women and girls have greater capacity to implement sustainable and climate resilient livelihood options. So that could be through tree growing or other climate resilient options. We really wanted to share best practice in Wales and in Uganda, and we've had 1 partner exchange where we went in March to learn from the work that METGE are doing, and there will be a repeat exchange in the autumn. And I guess this is also another opportunity now in the community of practice to share learning, and we hope to do another kind of bigger webinar in the autumn around the kind of findings of the project. And also we want to take the work that our partners in Uganda are doing and share the stories of particularly some amazing, inspiring women are doing in Uganda to tackle climate change, and share them here with children in Wales through our education outreach work. And we did a little bit of that at the summer summit, the Hub Cymru Africa Summer Summit, where we had one of the women that run one of the tree nurseries speak at our on the panel of Hub Cymru Africa's event. That's just a bit of a background to the project. So we have here are a couple of the key activities that the project is going to be or has already started doing. So we're going to be focusing on the first one, which is the gender assessment, which Lorna will talk a bit more about. We're kind of going to be also mapping the kind of political context, the rights of women's and access to natural resources. What are the barriers to those, and where are the opportunities to overcome them? As I said before, we're really keen to engage with both men and women on the issue of gender. So we're training 40 gender champions, and be training 222 rural women and girls on their rights and leadership skills. Strengthening local microfinance groups to support climate smart initiatives. There are a lot of village saving groups that can be strengthened and can be a good tool for communities to make them more resilient to climate change. And then these kind of income generating activities. And the partner exchange I mentioned before. So those are just to give you a flavour of what it is that we're doing. So the first thing that we started was the gender assessment, which Lorna will take you through. I'll stop sharing.
Lorna, would you like me to share the presentation?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, I'll do that.
Okay, great. Are you able to share it, Lynn, or on your?
Yes, I have it, and I should be able to. Okay, can you all see that?
Okay. Hello, everyone. Hello, hope you can hear me.
We can hear you.
Yes,
Hi.
That's good then. Thank you so much, Lena and Janet, for giving us this opportunity to share what we are doing in Mbale, Uganda, Eastern Uganda. with everybody and specifically sharing our experience from the gender assessment that was concluded. My presentation will basically look at the participatory gender assessment methodologies that we've been able to use. And then I'll also talk about the findings from the gender assessment, and then the challenges that we faced in the process of doing the assessment. And then I'll also look at a couple of lessons learned on how that tool was used. Lena, I think you can take me to slide 4, because Barbara has already given a very, okay. Let's start from this slide. The participatory gender assessment. Like the heading sounds, this assessment was very participatory. It involved all the key stakeholders that we feel are part and parcel of this project. One of the methodologies that we looked at is the literature review. We're examining existing literature on the policies, the laws, both national and international perspectives on gender, climate change, and natural resource management. We believe that a similar study could have been done by other partners elsewhere. So we'd like to know what were their views, what were they saying about some of the findings that we got in this study. And then we had the participatory phase where we conducted inception meetings. These inception meetings were done with district stakeholders like the natural resource officers, the community development officers. We also did it with the sub-county officials, where we had both the technical and also the political wing at the sub-counties. And then with the local community, the groups that we are working with, we did inception meetings with them. And we also had pre-testing of the tool. This helped us a lot because after pre-testing the tool, we are able to come back and retailer the tool. What is it that works for us in this context? And you get feedback. Is the tool too long? Is it, so we're able to adjust on the assessment tool as well. The other methodology was the administration of the tool, where we had the focus group discussions. Now, we are working with 11 VSLA groups, the Village Savings and Loans groups, and each of the groups had 10 representatives who participated in the focus group discussions. It was very interactive, a 3-day session, and the ideas that they contributed was really brilliant and quite productive to the project. We also had the key informant interviews. The key informants, we targeted the district officials, both from the government officials, both from the district and then the sub-county that we are working in. We also targeted religious leaders, both the Muslim and the Christian community were represented, opinion leaders, and also some of the civil society organizations that are working in the community where we're implementing this project and where the assessment was carried out. The data analysis, here a lot of information was collected from the focus group discussions, the key informant interviews. So basically we're looking at putting this information together and also report writing. The findings from the assessment, I've kind of broken it down, and I'll start with the general geographic, the general demographic characteristics of these respondents. The age, the majority of our respondents, both the men and the women, were aged above 41 years. Looking at their gender, the majority of the respondents were women, as is the composition of the VSLA groups. Someone may wonder where were the men. In the formation of these VSLA groups, the men came together with their wives to form these groups. But as time went on, as a mindset, actually, I would say, they later on left to the women because they felt that this can now be carried on or done by the women. They feel they don't have the time to come for the weekly meetings, the saving sessions and everything. But I mean, when it comes to borrowing of the money, the women will come and borrow, the men will use, and then again, they pay it back through the women. So you realize that the men are being reached out to, but in a kind of an indirect way. The marital status, most of our respondents were married women, and that stood at 81%. And then the next were the widows, that stood at 10%. And then we had the divorced and the singles, that stood at 7% and 2% respectively. Looking at the education, the majority of the women had primary school as their highest level of education, and it's standing at 44%. And then the second was the secondary level schooling, that stood at 35%. And then we had a few, really few, tertiary education. In Uganda, tertiaries are basically certificate courses. That stood at 7%. And then none attend university level education in the groups. Employment or paid work. Small scale agriculture is the main source of income and livelihood actually in this community or the population where we carried out this assessment. We had respondents who are self-employed. It stood at 58%. These respondents are engaged in farming and also other small scale enterprises like sale of groceries. This sale of groceries like sugar, some soap, matchboxes, among others. Some respondents are employed and also volunteering. For example, like I said, we also interacted with some civil society organizations. They also have programs in this area. So some of them have volunteers that are actually building capacity of people in these areas. So some of those respondents were employed, but also volunteering, and some were completely unemployed. Looking at findings on living conditions, the income levels. According to the respondents, income varies from season to season. The agricultural activities is their main source of livelihoods. These are farmers basically in the community that you're working with. They perceive one's income to be good, especially during the rainy season, because then the yields can be good. But in the dry season, the yields are really bad. So that means there's no income, or the income is really poor. Some of them are into agriculture as well as small-scale enterprises as an alternative source of income. The water quality also varies during dry and rainy season. Water is scarce usually during the dry season, and their main source, especially during the rainy season, is the rainwater, which they feel is safe and even safe for drinking and for home consumption. They also noted that during the dry season, the streams and the shallow wells are usually polluted because both the animals and the community are using that source of water. Looking at the economic activities, in this sub-county, they have their own farm livelihood activities that they participate in, and also the off-farm activities that they participate in. So looking at the on-farm livelihood activities, they have agriculture, livestock keeping, growing of trees, among others. And then the off-farm, they're involved in petty trade, for example, shopkeeping. They're also involved in sale of second-hand clothes, and also transport business, use of motorcycles, commonly known as boda-bodas in Uganda. Yeah. The housing types, we looked at different housing types. The temporary roof that the majority are actually dwelling in, the temporary roof and wall materials. In this area, the houses that are falling under this category is basically mud. The walls are mud, and then some have some iron sheets on their houses. And then the built permanent wall, where they use stones or bricks, the walls are cemented or plastered, and also the roofs are iron sheets. And then the other category of respondents are living in semi-temporary housing that has a mixture of the temporary and the permanent roofing. The bricks, and then you find the bricks, and then it is also cemented, although the roofing may not be that very good. Health facilities. The health facilities do exist in this sub-county. However, the distances vary from place to place. In some places, the health centers are close by. In other places, the health centers are a bit far. In other places, it is very far. But also some respondents noted that in their areas, they completely do not access the health facilities. And then also, they noted that some of these facilities are not well equipped and not also well staffed. They looked at dispensaries and small health centers and small clinics as well within their areas. The respondents also noted that they have maternal services, especially provided by the traditional birth attendants. Energy access. Different sources of energy was noted in this sub-county, like electricity. Although electricity, we only had like 1% of the respondents using electricity, meaning its distribution in the sub-county is very, very low. The majority are using wood fuel, which is used for cooking at the household levels, but also in production of building bricks. Actually, in this area, there's a lot of bricklaying as one of the livelihood activities that they're participating in. So you realize that the cutting of trees is also massive because they have to burn the bricks for construction. And then a good number of the respondents also noted that kerosene with lanterns are used for lighting. They also have access to solar system that they also use for lighting in the sub-county. Many of them have not had access to biogas and do not really know much about biogas. On land ownership, the individuals, we realize that the individuals who own this land, although the individuals have bought this land. So most of the land owned by the individuals in the sub-county are purchased. And then there's family land that is owned as a result of inheritances. Some of the land is rented, and then there's no land that is leased. Like none of the respondents noted that there's land that has been registered at either at the sub-county or at the national level with the land board. Access, power, and control over resources. The respondents noted that men have both access and control of the resources within the households. That includes the financial resources, the economic resources, the natural resources, and women still lag behind, though very few women have power and absolute control over their resources. This is particularly for women-headed households and the widows. They have the power and absolute control over their resources. This is attributed to the culture, norms, and beliefs, and the way of life of the local people, which still dictates control and ownership in this area. On decision-making and participation, we looked at women's influence on political processes, decision-making at different levels. The respondents noted that women influence political processes and decision-making at different levels, looking at from the village level to the parish, to the sub-county, up to the district levels. By actively participating in community meetings and political engagements, they are able to make decisions, but also to influence the political processes. The women have directly been able to influence how their leaders are elected, especially during the campaigns. The women fully participate and they're able to vote for whoever they feel is fit to fill up a given position. The findings on key gender issues prioritized by the community. Throughout the discussions that we had with the focus group discussion respondents, they brought out suggestions on how best they feel decision-making and participatory processes can be improved in their communities. And one of the things they looked at is reviewing of cultural practices. Culture was cited as the main underlying cause of limited opportunities for women in decision-making processes. The women proposed continuous awareness and inclusion of the men in the process so that they also reconsider their cultural practices and beliefs. Enhancing education levels. Most women have limited education and access to information and opportunities pertaining to their gender rights. The other priority area that they cited is supporting their livelihoods. Support to livelihoods, particularly those activities that will improve their household income levels and food security. They noted that they as women take full responsibility to provide for their families in the community. So if this support is given to boost their livelihoods, then it would really be a boost for them, and also they'll be able to get sufficient time to participate in other activities. They also talked about tackling of gender-based violence. The respondents noted that GBV is very rampant in their area, and they cited issues of assault. And as a result of this, many of them are unable to express their views and to participate in decision-making. Therefore, they recommended that if relevant institutions can come in and support them in this particular area, then it would enable the women to regain confidence again, especially in institutions of marriages, but also be able to participate freely in their communities. Findings on the impact that climate change has over livelihoods and resources. The lives and livelihoods of this rural community is affected by climate change. And this is not any different in Bushi and the sub-county. The rural livelihoods in this sub-county is rain-fed and is increasingly exposed to climate impacts. The major climatic hazards identified by the respondents during this assessment include long droughts and erratic rainfall that has been observed over the last several years. These hazards affect the natural resource-based activities of the communities, especially agriculture and water availability. Conclusions from the findings. I've just tried to run through, but we have a report that has a lot of details on the findings, and that would give more insight. Conclusions from the findings. There is still a lot to be done to improve the voice, participation, and decision-making process by women, as well as overall gender equity in Bushende sub-county. We need to promote actions and opportunities that will provide women with equal access to economic resources like land, capital, technology, and capacity building, which should target both women and men on gender equity. There is need for empowerment to ensure the voices of women are raised and heard if they are to play an important role in building resilience towards climate change. There is a need to improve livelihoods and strengthen the adaptation capacity by ensuring women access, control, and ownership of resources. Next slide. The challenges, just like any study, there were a few challenges that we registered in the process of doing this assessment. And one of them is that the respondents were mainly rural women with low level of formal education. The information gathered was based on their memory and limited exposure to information and external experiences on gender issues outside their areas and socioeconomic groups. Therefore, there is a possibility of some errors in the process of data collection. And then the other challenge was the long distances of travel to the assessment study venue. Though the meeting venue was centrally located, some respondents spent long hours to travel to the venue due to long distances from their homes. It therefore limited the hours spent on interviews, as we had to create time for them to get back to their homes in time. Family commitments, long distances, and livelihood activities. This assessment was conducted during the rainy season, so it prevented members of some groups from participating entirely in the study. Some of them preferred to stay and continue digging, planting, and everything, so some members were not able to fully participate in the study. Lessons learned. One is that gender equality makes good economic sense. There can be no strong and healthy growth of an economy without gender equality. So it's very critical, and it's a very critical part of any strategy for durable, resilient, and more inclusive growth. Investment in women boosts economic development. The second lesson that we learned is that there are many affordable ways to push gender equality at all levels. And this includes, for example, talking in different forums when opportunities arise, supporting women, promoting and embracing diversity, taking into consideration age, ethnicity, disabilities. Looking at ethnicity, currently in the area where we conducted the assessment, we realized that it has only the Lugisu speaking community. But of course, with the intermarriages and migration of people, time will come when other tribes will also come into the community. So it would just be important for them to equally be included in such initiatives. The other lesson that we learned is that there is need to listen, be curious about, and really hear and understand the voices of women and men to be able to design appropriate interventions and participatory methodologies and approaches for engagement and implementation. We also learned that addressing gender issues means confronting challenges facing both the males and the females. It's never about having pity on one gender against the other. The men equally need to be part of this process. The changing traditional mindsets about gender issues can take time. We need to promote gender responsive norms, like treating all people with equal respect. I gave an example earlier about the men who are not participating in directly in the VSLM meetings, but when it comes to borrowing the money, they borrow it through their wives, and then they also pay it through their wives. In this particular community, realize that the men prefer engaging in businesses and being around trading centers other than being involved in the VSLA groups and its activities. The other lesson is that gender-related issues are often interlinked with other dimensions of poverty, like not having ownership, access to and control over resources, opportunities, and choice. One's possibility to develop or use the resources to move out of the situation that they're in. Then the power and voice. This relates to people's ability to articulate their concerns, their needs and rights, and to take part in decision-making, affecting these concerns inside the households and also the communities and at the national level. Thank you so much for listening. I hope I did not run through so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Lorna. Thank you very much. That's great. We really appreciated those insights and the level of detail that you've explained. So thank you, Lorna. I think probably we're going to open it up now to questions. So if anybody's got a question, please just unmute yourself and ask the question, but tell us introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And I think we can open it up now, and you can take your video off as well. Has anybody got a question? Or I can start. Oh, Steve, go ahead.
Not so much a question, but hopefully a useful comment. First, thanks so much for all that. I mean, it's very valuable information, and it certainly reflects. So I've been involved with a project in Western Uganda for the past few years, which is working with women, and it's called the Women's Rights Advocacy Project. What really just sprang to mind was that I would love to put you in touch with each other, because, you know, I really think that all the issues that you've mentioned are exactly the same issues, not surprisingly. It's relatively rural. It's in near Kasese, but it's a small town where my friend, Petson Kastuma is his name. He's based in the town. He's from that town. And anyway, yeah, like I'm just sure that you would have an awful lot to learn from each other. And also, I mean, apologize that this is stating the obvious, but as a part of supporting his work and learning from him, you know, I discovered that there are 2 or 3 quite big women's organizations in Kampala that are working with all of these issues. And I'm sure you know about them, but you know how sometimes you find out about things. Certainly people come to Cardiff sometimes and they tell me about organizations in town that I didn't even know about. You know, sometimes outsiders somehow get this different perspective. So I'd be more than happy, like I say, I'm sure you know about them, but I'd be more than happy to send you those links if that would be helpful.
Thank you.
That's great. I think that's always good to get in touch and to find out who else is involved in the sector. Really appreciate it. So I think, Sarah, you had a question?
Yes, thank you very much for that brilliant presentation, Lorna, on the work that you're doing in Eastern Uganda. I'm from Kenya, I'm joining from Somaliland. And I just echo what Steve has just said, because many of those issues touch on women's rights. And I don't know anywhere in the world, apart from Somaliland, where there isn't even one single woman in parliament. So these are really power positions where if we can perhaps exchange, if you can exchange those contacts, Steve, I think it would help us as well. I have a question about, you gave us the personal characteristics of the group of women, and it's very clear that the women are doing a brilliant job in difficult situations. But I was just wondering, sometimes we try to look at, when you look at the group, you try and identify some who are really at risk. So you gave us the marital status, education levels, employment and unemployed. And sometimes, like we had in our last group presentation, we try to find women for whom all those ones come together. So for example, women who are, because we had, you mentioned that women-headed households, where the woman is either a widow or a single parent, they have absolute control of power over their decision-making and resources that they have. So perhaps there's a group of women who are married and whose education level is perhaps low, and then who are unemployed and not in paid work. So maybe that's another category you could try to extrapolate, try to extract from your data and see perhaps how you could help them. Because if they're single, they probably have the right to make certain decisions, even if it's small, just to improve her livelihood. So I thought that was would be a very interesting group, which we normally call at risk or at higher vulnerability. It is comes also quite clearly that the men are participating for the money. That comes out clearly. And the men invest, their interests are different. They're investing in the money. So for climate change related, I can see why gender is a major issue, because I don't know whether those women have control or have a say on where to plant trees, where not to plant trees. Because if the women can have a say in that, if the women have a say over where to plant trees, and that's something I thought would come out, that would show how women can then impact, because they are hands-on. So maybe Barbara or Lorna, you can tell us, do women have a right and a say over which trees to be planted, which ones not to be planted, which ones to be chopped, the making of firewood and so on, because that would give us an idea about the impact that these women could have. Just a question.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Sarah, for that question. Do women have a right? Looking at, let me start from the cultural base of Uganda as a country. I know it is not any different from Kenya. Culturally, women do not own land. And when it comes to making decisions about the use of land, it is usually done by the men in the households. So when it comes to tree planting as well, of course, the women are interested in planting these trees. The women usually go for like fruit trees because they are looking at getting the fruits to sustain the family. Because we realize that in this community, mostly it is the women who fend for the family. So if, for example, she has a mango tree by the house, when the children come back home, they're able to pick a fruit and eat. But also out of that fruit tree, she's able to sell and get some money that will boost her income at home. But she cannot just wake up in the morning and plant a tree without consulting her husband. They have to do it as I would say a household, so that when tomorrow she wants to trim or prune some of these branches to use it for firewood, the husband allows her to do it. But there are also instances where if a woman just planted a tree without consulting the husband, he has a right to tell you that that tree is not yours. You're not going to cut it, you're not going to use it, you're not going to do anything. And the tree will grow, he will cut, get his timber and go and sell it, and the woman will not benefit anything. So those are some of the cultural beliefs and norms that we have in these communities that of course need changing, but it's a gradual process because it's rooted in the mind. It's a mindset. They feel that a woman cannot own land. But in my presentation, I also noted that there are women who have land, but they've purchased the land. So where she has bought the land, she can freely plant whatever tree she would like to plant on that piece of land. And one of the things that actually METGE has done is to continue sensitizing the community about the different tree species that we have, so that the women, while making decisions, they make an informed decision. What kind of tree do I want to plant in my garden? What kind of tree do I want to plant around my homestead? But we've also informed them that you don't need a very big piece of land to plant some of these trees. The trees that METGE promotes are agroforestry trees that can actually then be planted in the gardens where they are digging and planting crops. Some of these trees do well with other crops. It doesn't really affect the yields and everything. So we try to encourage them to use the little resources that they have, but of course as a household, because at the end of the day, we are trying to boost the household income.
Thank you, Lorna. Maybe I've got a question, if I may, just on that point about household income. You mentioned in your presentation that the need for enterprises to support livelihoods to earn more income was a top priority for women. Are you saying that you know, there's a division in terms of women's income and men's income, and that women, even within a married household, a woman has control over some sources of income that are deemed to be like her livelihood or her income source or her enterprise, or are household enterprise considered somehow shared responsibility? Do you have any thoughts on that, Lorna?
My network was fluctuating a bit. Is it possible to rephrase for me the question a bit?
You said, hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can now.
Okay, Lorna, you said that livelihoods was a top priority.
Yes, it came out from the community as one of the top priority areas where they would feel, if supported, it would really boost their livelihood, yes.
So do you perceive that if you promote livelihood or enterprises or income generating activities specifically for women, that they then have control over that income?
I wouldn't really say yes, because when we interacted with these people, when they raised this as one of the areas they feel they would be boosted to improve their household income, they also get this money from whatever resource that they have been, whatever enterprise they've been supported with. They use it as a household. For example, because this project looks at introducing sustainable land management that will look at improving the agricultural outputs. So if, for example, a woman is able to sell some matoke or some bananas and get some money out of that, the banana bunches, she's going to sit with her husband, and then they look at some of the areas where they need to put this money. And most of them said one of the areas they'll look at is the children's education. Do they have books? Do they need to use this money to buy some scholastic materials for the children? Is it that a child in the house is sick and they're able to put this money on the table and seek for medical support? Is it that they need to invest more in the agricultural products, maybe look at planting more crops other than the bananas that they've been able to sell? So at the end of the day, it's more of not my money, but our money that is brought to the table, and then the family decides on what can we put this money into and what can we get out of it. So they're looking at the broader picture of changing the entire family.
Thank you, Lorna.
Thank you.
I think Sarah, you wanted to.
Yeah, only if no one else is going. I don't want to dominate, but I come from Kenya, but I was born and grew up in Uganda, in Makerere. And I am aware that some of the issues that Lorna is mentioning are just so critical to the advancement of women. And I thank you, Lorna, for bringing it out so clearly. In my rural part of Kenya, along the Lake Victoria, it's more patriarchal than I think anywhere else in East Africa. We don't even inherit land from our parents, my particular tribe. So what women did is we started forming cooperatives, and I don't know if that's something that is feasible. We started coming together in small groups, and then we would register the little group. So we would then start doing things as a group, because then no single husband can come and tear it apart. And some of those groups, also promoted by Mama Anna Mkapa, the former president of Tanzania, really helped us women in really patriarchal societies where, although there is a formal law, we still didn't have right over land. Lorna, I don't know whether this is something you've started doing together. Maybe the women could acquire some little land together. Maybe the county could give women some, as a group, some land where they could now have the right to plant things. Because otherwise, if we are to grow trees and the trees depend on the ones the men can cut for firewood, I think that it may pose a problem for future generations. Do you have women's groups in your part of the country?
Yes, Sarah. Actually, we are working with groups. So even the information that we've been able to share came out of the groups that we are working with. So these groups are involved in village savings and loans, where they're able to borrow money out of the savings. And that is why some of them have been able to purchase small pieces of land that they can use. It's out of those loans that they're able to rent some land and they use. But it's a good idea to encourage them to form those bigger cooperatives and see how far they can go as women to be able to access some of these resources like land. But of course, all that comes back to advocacy, right from the sub-county levels through to the district and the national levels. But it's something to think about. Thank you.
Yeah, I just do worry, because if the main activity is savings, and we know that the men are waiting like vultures, as they do in Africa, to pounce on the money to take to their business, then it's like a slow puncture. So again, like Steve was saying, perhaps working together with other groups from other parts, you could brainstorm, what have you done so as to improve. And then that way you could come up with other, diversify. Because if the women are doing all the collecting of the money, and when it reaches the time for borrowing, they have a bit and they go, the men borrow it, that's not good. But finally, and very finally, sometimes when you have a big group, the women, you really have to contribute just a little. So even if they didn't have another source of income, but they just contributed a little regularly, and we can email each other about that. We've been able to form some widows who are really hardly anything and have been kicked out because refusing wife inheritance. Thank you very much. I'll let others now have a say.
Thank you, Sarah. I think Barbara, you put your hand up, and then Fiona.
Yeah, it was just to ask Steve really, and whether the Women's Rights Advocacy Project does work on land rights issues, because it is such a challenging topic, and METGE alone are not going to be able to solve the problem. And obviously their focus up until now has been kind of tree growing and livelihoods work. But yeah, knowing if they did, I saw you raised your hand before, Steve.
Yes, certainly. One of the issues that Pedson had identified was the fact that sort of the old style was that widows would not inherit their husband's property. It would go through the family, through to another male in the family, and they're very much working on changing that, because that's illegal, but it's still a cultural practice. I mean, I just wanted to really quickly say that 3 areas where I think they've really had success is they've certainly encouraged women to set up small cooperatives, small microfinance cooperatives, where they each chip in a small amount each week to support them to set up new businesses. But they've been very keen, and I think very effective, on recruiting men to be advocates for gender equality. And one of the areas where that's really worked has been in schools, working with mixed classes, making sure that boys and girls are equally educated about the importance of women's rights. Because as you said, it's not just a benefit to women, it's going to be a benefit to the whole economy. Everybody wins when there is gender equality. So, boys coming out as advocates for equality, and then also working with males in the community, holding forum meetings where it's explained what the benefits are of equality, and men then coming forward rather than being vultures, coming forward and saying, yeah, look, I understand what you're saying, and I want to be an advocate for equality. I'm going to treat my wife as equal, and I'm going to try and encourage other men to do the same, because I can see that it brings benefits for everybody. So it's not like an overnight change. Cultural practices take a long time to change, but there is real evidence there that men can be successfully recruited to be advocates for gender equality, and that seems to be when things really start to shift.
Thank you, Steve. Fiona.
Thank you so much, Lorna and Sarah, for the study, Lorna. And then Sarah, you raised a very important issue of women forming cooperatives and then being able to buy land. And of course, obviously it is cheap, because everyone pulls a small amount and they're able to achieve a big thing. I really want to understand more, how do you safeguard that investment? Because in case of any disagreement, they will forget the journey they walked to be able to buy that land. So how do you safeguard it, that you're able to handle the issue of disagreements and you have that sustainable investment? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fiona.
Is it okay? I'll just respond by putting my email in the chat, because I'd really like to give some input, Fiona, that can be sustainable. And I'll put my email there so we can correspond. I can, after here, because we have less time. But I also know what I know about land in Uganda, because my referee, Lady Justice Damali Ruanga, was a judge, a lady justice in the land court in Uganda. So I want to be able not just to give you small points, but to give you people within Uganda who can help you, in addition to what Steve said. So please email me afterwards and we can continue the chat.
Thank you very much. I think we are Oh gosh, Lena, what are we going to do? People have started.
Yeah, it's a shame. It would be so good to have more time to talk about it. I don't know. But I really feel it should be, we should enable the exchange, definitely following this meeting as well. It just shows that there is definitely need for that. I think, well, we do still have the room, but I understand if people probably will have to go. Maybe I'm happy to stick around for a little bit longer, but if that's, I don't know, Beth, correct me, but just to say, if people need to go, that's fine. Otherwise, I'm happy to, if we stay a bit longer with those that are interested, to continue.
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, we don't have any other bookings on the Zoom account, but probably Lorna and Hope, your questions should probably be the last ones, if that's okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve.
Okay, so I think Hope, you put up your hand. Did you want to have a? Did you just want to have a question?
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much, Lorna, for the presentation. And my name is Hope from the Uganda National Apiculture Development Organization. And my question has to do with, my question has to do with the relationship between also gender and other marginalized groups, because we are looking at this from the perspective of gender and climate change. And then we know that there is that relationship, as already shared in the report, there is that relationship also between gender, poverty, and then vulnerability. So in the presentation, we noted, yes, that we have this, there were a number of issues that were raised in the findings, though I don't know, maybe it was because of that time, but if we could hear from Lorna, I don't know if there was a time also to clearly explain, for instance, these different categories that are more marginalized than the others, and then what the findings, for instance, recommend could be the steps in addressing these specific challenges that they face. Thank you.
Thank you, Hope. I think we'll let Lorna, if you have anything to share on that point about the disaggregation of vulnerabilities in your study, whether that was something that you looked at. And then I think maybe that will have to be the last point if we're considering our time limitation. Thank you, Hope. Thank you, Lorna.
Thank you, Hope. That's quite another lengthy discussion that we can also have like out of here to give an in-depth information from our findings. But I just try to mention a few categories of people that we are going to, that we engaged in the assessment. And of course, we also know that from this assessment, it's going to guide our implementation. So I don't know if it is possible for you to get back to me and then we can have a more lengthy discussion on this.
That is fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Hope.
All right, so I think that just leaves us to say, express our appreciation and thanks to Barbara and Lorna for sharing your presentation and answering questions. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you very much.